We'll be looking today at the first topic of sociology optional, which is modernity and social changes in Europe and the emergence of sociology. Roughly every year, every once in 2 years, about you have a straight question from this topic. If you look at the previous year's papers, as far as this topic is concerned, the questions are fairly straightforward. Questions like sociology as a discipline is uh, was born to study the changes in Europe, or questions like what are the intellectual developments in modern Europe that led to the emergence of sociology, or what are the social forces in Europe that led to the emergence of sociology. These are all fairly straightforward questions, and you will notice that um, it is not. It it'll just basically we'll just discuss like a historical view of early modern Europe. What are the changes that happened? We will segregate the changes into um, social, economic, political, religious, intellectual, most importantly, and how each of those changes then led into um, questions that were asked by sociologists and how the discipline itself was born. We will look into some of them. But before that, there are certain key terms that I'll be presenting for each class. These terms usually will seem, because sociology is a very generic subject, some of these terms will appear like, okay, you know the meaning, you've heard it you've heard it all your life since a child. So you may imagine that you may know its meaning, but actually it is important for you to, but when writing it down, or if somebody asks you, it will be much harder to explain what the meaning of a particular term is. For instance, uh, take the keyword in this topic itself, modernity. I would like you to give it a shot. What do you think is the meaning of the term modernity? Just give an answer. What do you think is modernity? Try defining it, try articulating it, whatever comes to your mind. However, say a undergrad or a 17, 18-year-old person first time came across the word modernity, comes and asks you, um, what is modernity? How do you explain to them?
So changes in the belief system, like old beliefs to new beliefs,
Yes,
due to industrial revolution and all, changes in the belief system of people, like questioning old beliefs and changing to new thinking.
yes, yes, yes. Does everybody feel that is the meaning, or does anyone have any other input?
So the quality of being modern.
Okay, quality of being modern. Yes, technically, what you're saying, but what is being modern then? I mean, if the kid is asking you what is modernity, and you say modernity is the quality of being modern, then the question in return is, then what is modern?
It is like latest.
Hmm, latest. Very good. Yeah. It has to do with the present, the contemporary, as opposed to the past. When you mean latest, you're referring usually in that sense. Ki, no, it is the current trending, the present, as opposed to something in the past. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else wants to give a shot? Um, so we got two answers, and both answers are valid. One is that it is a change. It refers to a change in basic beliefs and attitudes. Okay, and the new set of beliefs and attitudes are more. She used the word as a consequence of industrial revolution. But even before industrial revolution, there is scientific thinking and reason, rationality, things like that. We'll look into that. And Another student gave the answer that it refers to something. First, she said it's a quality of being modern. And what is modern? Modern is current, latest, present, things like that. Both of you are about right. Um, I think the first student had some reading, which is why. But also, you will notice because you read, there is a slight confusion in your thinking. And this is essential not just for sociology as an optional, but general UPSC preparation. You should be careful. You can't confuse concepts. Okay, you need to have very clear understanding of each concept, and which is why it is important that you write, that you discuss, that that you talk, because it comes out. Industrial revolution. When you said changes in beliefs as a consequence of industrial revolution, what industrial revolution brought about is changes in the society, changes in thought. In some ways, preceded the industrial revolution. Not, it wasn't the consequence of industrial revolution. Rather, it was even before industrial revolution. And no, you can't make those slight mistakes that will give away to the examiner that in your head things are not very neat and clean. Now, um, before we go into the key terms, there is even more important what we called a suffix. So any word, you can add a word before it. Like for example, uh, understanding is a word. Misunderstanding. Mis is a prefix. And then you have suffixes. In these in your social science disciplines, in your actually any discipline, any academic field, there are a couple of suffixes that are generally used. One of them is ity, one of them is ism, one of them is zatin, zation. These are very typical suffixes that will come again and again and again. And it is important for you to distinguish these suffixes because these are words that you'll regularly hear. And if you can't make a distinction between the two, your clarity is fudged. Okay. Um, Now, when a word ends with the term ity, okay, it refers to the state of, the condition of, or the quality of a particular phenomenon. So there is a phenomenon, and the state of that phenomenon, if you want to describe, you will call ity. Which is why, if you notice the second answer when I asked the question, she said the quality of being modern. In other words, you can say the state of being modern, the condition of being modern is called modernity. And that is because the ity, modern, and ity means the state or the condition, or so whenever you need to write in a question, there is a word with ity in your essay or in your ethics or in your, you can simply start with the condition of being or the state of being. Okay, whatever that word is, you need to now break that word. Like in this case, modern was broken into either a change in belief or referring to the present. Which of that is correct and how much of which is correct is something we'll discuss in the class. But you get the suffix ity refers to the quality of, the state of, or the condition of being. The suffix ism, this you will get it left, right, and center in your general studies and in your sociology paper. Whenever a word ism is added as a suffix, okay, you need to understand ism refers to a set of beliefs. It is usually a worldview. Okay, it is a way of looking at the world. It is a coherent, it is a consistent and usually coherent set of beliefs, a family of beliefs put together. It is a worldview. Whenever you add ism, it's an ideology. Usually, ism refers to an ideology. In its broadest term, it can even refer to a philosophy that you have internalized. Okay. So, for example, communism refers to an ideology, a political ideology, or a philosophy, a set of ideas of or beliefs that the 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 community interest is more important than an individual's interest. Okay, and that it another belief in that philosophy is that abolition of private property. If there are no individuals, if we are all members of a community, what is the point of having private property, individual private property? Property should be shared by everybody. Now, that is one of the beliefs of communism. But usually you'll use the word ism for a set of beliefs. It's not a single belief. When a set of beliefs come together and almost form a coherent view, a worldview, a way of looking at the world itself, and making sense of the world, that is then the word ism is added. So basically, ism refers to an ideology or a belief or a set of beliefs, in fact, or a worldview or a philosophy. Then the word zation. So before we go to zation, ism. So modernism refers to a set of beliefs or attitudes which are modern. So Deepika, when you said modernity is a set of beliefs and attitudes, um, you're very close, but you're not accurate. When you're referring specifically to the set of beliefs and attitudes, modern set of beliefs and attitudes, or then it should be modernism, not modernity. Modernity is a state, is a condition. Modernism is the belief and the attitudes. Zation, similarly, Hinduism. Hinduism is a set of beliefs, core beliefs, um, that uh, that constitute the Hindu faith, the Hindu religion. Now, what are those beliefs? Karma, dharma, reincarnation. Now, some of these are core beliefs, and this constitutes what is Hinduism. It's the set of beliefs. Christianity, ITY again, Christianity refers to the state of being, or a widespread phenomenon of many people believing in the Christian faith. So Christianity is predominant in Europe or in the West. When we say that, we are referring to a state of, a condition of the Christian faith being a predominant religion there. I hope you're getting the difference now. ITY versus ISM. Then there is usually the Zation, ZATIN. So modernization, globalization, industrialization, okay, liberalization. These are words that come. Whenever the word zation comes, industrialization comes, globalization comes, do not use beliefs and systems, because beliefs and attitudes are ism. Neither is it a state or a condition. I've many times corrected papers where in globalization somebody says it is a state of interconnectedness. No, no, no. Zation, the moment there is a suffix zation, it refers to a process. It is more dynamic in nature. Okay, whenever the word zation exists, it is more uh, it is a process that is happening. So modernization is a process of adopting modern beliefs, attitudes. It is a process of adopting modern industries or modern ways of living, modern culture, Western culture. Okay, when you say Western culture, again it becomes Westernization. The focus now is on the word zation. Don't bother about the examples that I'm giving: Westernization, globalization, modernization, and all. Focus on the term zation, the suffix. It refers to the process that is happening. So industrialization is a process of bringing industries into an economy or a society and adopting them and making um, urbanization is a process of building cities and moving away from a more peasant and agricultural way of life to a more city bred way of life. That process is called urbanization. So those are some of the key I wanted to clarify before even we go into the terms itismization. The other one of the important key terms is revolution. Revolution refers to a sudden and drastic change, almost a fundamental and total change. Change is always happening. Okay, change is happening in your environment, physical changes are happening, social changes are happening, biological changes are happening. You are growing, from an infant. A human life grows from an infant to an adult to oldhood. Societies are changing. We are constantly moving. Innovations are happening. Physical changes, environments change all the time. But all of these changes are very gradual. What makes change a revolution is if the change is sudden in a very short span of time, and it is fundamental. It is almost total. Like, you cannot imagine what the person was earlier, which is why know only when the change is so sudden and so total, so fundamental, that you cannot almost recognize what is there later after the change has happened. What is the So when a society changes or a human being changes, you can tell, oh, I saw him 10 years back, yeah, he was like that, now he's like this. You can tell the change, okay, because the change is gradual, and some bits of the old are still present in the new. But a revolution typically refers to when everything old is discarded and something new comes. Now, in modernity, obviously, as the term suggests, and as somebody put it, there is a big change, and a lot of these changes are captured by the terms revolution. There are political revolutions like the French Revolution, like there is economic revolutions like the Industrial Revolution, which is also a technological revolution. There are scientific revolutions. There is revolution in the thought. Uh, there are revolutions in the religion, okay, either towards secularism or entirely giving up religion, or the religion reforming into something else. Earlier, there was Catholicism or Roman Catholics, and they went away, and there was a reformation in the church, and there was place for Protestantism. Anyway, basically, revolution refers to that kind of a sudden change from earlier system to a new system. These basic terms and many more, I've presented about 8-10 basic concepts or basic terms relevant to this class. It will be shared on the group. A PDF is made. It will be shared on the group. But pay attention to what I'm saying in the class, because that is more important. I mean, when you see the definition, remember, definitions are written in very technical language. For you to really appreciate it, for you to really understand, and for you to grasp it entirely, it is important that you understand while the class is happening. Then when you read it, immediately it hits you. You'll be able to memorize it better, but B, you'll be able to reproduce it better. You'll be able to internalize and digest it better. The next term is reason. REASON. Again, a term that you very constantly hear. It is very common for you to hear this term, reason. You've been hearing it from your childhood. Uh, in a very simplistic term, it refers to what caused it. What is the reason you did it? We ask, what is the cause? What is the motive? But here in sociology, when we use the term reason, we are using it in a different way. Reason here refers to a cognitive process. It is a process that is happening in our head where we take whatever our senses are perceiving, our sight, our audio, our olfactory, our taste, our tactile senses, the sense of touch. This is all going into the brain, and in the brain there are existing concepts, abstract concepts exist in our mind. These new senses and those concepts integrate, they synthesize to produce ideas. That process of producing the ideas, that process of synthesizing your senses to existing concepts, that process is called reasoning. So it is not the reason as, what is the reason you came late or something like that. It is not what caused it. This is a very technical term. It's used in philosophy. It is used in sociology. Again, I am taking the pain of explaining down to the simplest terms, because, these terms are used very regularly. They are used almost in every chapter, in every topic. But you need to understand how it is used. Very often, because they're so commonly used, you could think that we are referring to that reason, which is, what caused it, kind of a reason. What is the motive? Why did you do it? This reason is not that. This reason is, like I said, it is a specific process. It is a process, cognitive process. It's happening in the mind of an individual where he is conjuring up, he is creating new ideas, or he is understanding something, he is deducing something, he is looking at a pattern in the nature or in the society, and he's thinking, if this occurs, this occurs, if this occurs, this occurs, if this occurs, this occurs, then if this occurs, this will occur. He is coming to an inference. It is called deduction. He is deducing something. That process of deduction is reason. It is reasoning, which is why, if you remember your tests, your logic tests, or in quantitative aptitude, it is called reasoning, because there you're using this process, and this is crucial. Um, it is almost in contrast to tradition. So, in tradition, you hold an idea or you hold a belief because it has been passed on to you from your earlier generation. In tradition, you hold something to be true or valid, or you hold something of value, an idea, because somebody before you gave it to you. It's passed on to you. That is tradition. In reason, you arrive at your idea by yourself through either evidence, okay, that is presented to you. But evidence, how does it present to you? It presents to you, how do you grasp evidence? How do you understand evidence? You understand evidence because it presents itself. You read it, or you see it, you observe it, it comes into your mind, you have existing concepts, they both fuse, they both synthesize, and then you understand. That synthesizing process of evidence, of your perception, and then fusing with existing ideas, that is reasoning. It is in contrast to tradition, because in reason you arrive at the idea yourself, as opposed to in tradition where somebody gives it to you, and you almost, you it's not like you blindly follow it, but you believe that the earlier person knew the truth, or knew the what is the right thing, and they are passing it on to you, and therefore there is value in it. That is tradition. In reason, with reason, you in ways challenge that tradition. That's why reason is more critical of tradition. Whenever there is reason, tradition is challenged. It's a key term. It is there in the list of terms that I've shared on the group. I will be sharing soon after the lecture. It will be there in that. I've defined it. Sometimes I've given couple of definitions, one a simple definition, one a more elaborate definition, just to make it easier for you. But now that you've heard in the lecture, I'm sure when you read it, otherwise if you would have read it, you won't understand the definition. It reads something like this. Um, Reason is the means by which human beings achieve understanding by integrating perceptions received through the senses with concepts and associating them with knowledge already acquired. Reason is also the process of evaluating and manipulating ideas and facts. So in reason, we don't only create new ideas, we also manipulate existing ideas. So this is all reason. Another way of looking at reason is organized, systematic, and purposeful way of thinking. Reason also uses vehicles such as logic, deduction, and induction to make sense of perceptions and knowledge. For example, you know that the sum of three angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. Okay, that's an axiom. That's already given. If that is the case, uh, and if I give you two angles, 45, 45, your mind deduces there is already a concept or an axiom that the sum of three angles of a triangle is 180 degrees. And then I'm giving you the new information that two angles of a particular triangle are 45 degrees, 45 degrees. What is the third angle? It's 90 degrees, because 45, 45 is 90. 180 minus 90, triangle has three sides, so the third one has to be 90. This is called deduction. This is a very typical reasoning process that we use. Another reasoning process that we use is induction, which is the first time I saw a crow, it was black in color. Again, I saw a crow. Again, it's black in color. No matter how many times I see a crow, it is black in color. So I induce. Earlier, what did I do? I deduce. Now I induce, induction. I induce from the pattern. I've seen pattern that every crow that I see is black in color. So all crows are black in color. I haven't seen all the crows in the universe, yet I will say, I will agree with the statement. I will believe the statement is true when somebody says all crows are black. Okay. This is induction. Now, this is also a process of reasoning. One is you have some theory, a new information, and you're able to deduce. That is deduction. Here, you have many facts, you integrate all the facts, and you come to a conclusion. That is induction. Both are two ways of reasoning, but both are valid. You have logic, another way of reasoning. It is also another method. But basically, get a hang of the term reason. We will use it very often. It can be tricky, it can be slippery. You could have a slight fudgy understanding of it. I'm just trying to clarify the word reason. Then you have the word um, renaissance. Okay. The third term that you're seeing on your slide, RENAISSANCE, it is a French word, which is why it is not pronounced as Renaissance, but it is pronounced as Renaissance. Um, it refers to a celebration or it tries to reinvent the past. Renaissance is trying to rediscover the past. So, in the European society, they really had great cultural, effervescence. Like there was a lot of art, architecture, sculpture, music. It flourished during the Greco-Roman, during the ancient time, between 5th century BC to about 2nd century AD. The Greco-Roman, the Greece and the Roman civilizations were in their peaks. Whichever philosopher you read about, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they were all during that period. Great philosophies came around. Poetry, wonderful poetry was written during that time. Beautiful sculpture, some of the best sculpture in the world, even today, dates back to. In fact, there are a couple of sculptures in the Delhi and the Kolkata museums, the Indian Museum. They are the best museums in our country. And Rome has some of the best museums in the world. And if you go there, there are these sculptures from dating back to those periods. Exquisite. I mean, sculptures made of marble, sculpture made of stone, sculpture made of metal. One of the best sculptures. I mean, I remember watching one of this marble sculpture where, literally on the hand, the vein is also seen. That is how beautifully the sculpture is made. I mean, it is more real than even human flesh. Okay. Now, Europeans have always been in awe. They have always admired that ancient civilization of theirs. After about 3rd, 4th century AD, Christianity took root. By 6th to 7th century AD, Christianity in Europe, I'm talking about, um, really degraded. There's a lot of blind beliefs, black magic. The church got corrupted. The center of the church was Rome. It got corrupted. The Europe descended into what is called the Dark Ages. So that period is called Dark Ages. They became blind beliefs. They put a ban on art, architecture, sculpture, music. They became very very fundamental, very like you know they stopped progressing in some ways. They entered the Dark Ages. That's why they call Dark Ages. There is no light, there is no knowledge, there is no new ideas. They just got stuck where they were. In fact, they even burned several libraries of books, all the knowledge that was produced before that, because it was seen as being different from the Christian faith, or what the Bible says. Uh, they burnt libraries of books, and they descended into what is called the Dark Ages. They just fought amongst themselves. All progress stopped at that period. There was disease, there was death. Um, yeah. So that was about up to 11th, 12th century AD. Now, about 12th, 13th century AD. Okay, by the way, I don't know whether you know this or not. When I say 12th century, I'm referring to 1100s. Okay, I think you know. So when we say 19th century, we are referring to 1801 or actually 1800 to 1899. So 1850 or 1840s, 30s, 70s, 18 something is called the 19th century, which is why this is called the 20th century, 21st century, because it is 2010, 2020, 2030, whatever. This is all called. So century, when we say 21st century, we are referring to one 100 years. So why? Because what is the first century in history? What is the first century AD? First century AD is 0 to 100. So 100 to 200 becomes the second century, which is why when I use the word century, just be careful. We are referring to 1850s. When I say 19th century, we are referring to 1850s. Now, uh, so about 12th, 13th century onwards in Europe, and we are referring particularly to Italy, to Portugal, to Spain, to certain degree France, not so much the UK. This at this time UK was still very barbaric. It was still very, feudal and very traditional. But Italy and Portugal and Spain, they started seeing some changes. People started rediscovering this past, rediscovering their own past, their Greco-Roman ancient past, more than 1,000 years back. Those temples, those art, that architecture, that sculptures, and they were mesmerized by that poetry, that literature, that ideas, philosophy, uh, uh, political ideas, scientific ideas, and they started attempting to revisit or remake that past. They wanted to remake that past. They wanted to bring back those old traditions. That is Renaissance. When we say Renaissance, it is a movement in Europe to bring back the ancient. When I say the word ancient usually refers to a historical period between 6th century BC to about 10th century AD. Okay, even whether it's in ancient Indian history or ancient world history, we are referring to that period, but typically it refers to before Christ. Okay, that's what we refer to ancient. So when I say, so you can't call a 14th century phenomenon or a 14th century technology, you can't call it ancient. It is still modern. Remember, not only 20th century, but even a 15th century. So Newton is still modern. Newton is about 17th century. He's in 1600s, 15 to 1600s. So he's still modern. When I say ancient, I'm referring to really old. And in Europe, when that movement came to revive, the word is revive. They want to revive the art and the sensibility, the politics, the those ideas of the ancient Roman and Greece. That is called Renaissance. Renaissance. It is important for actually. It's also important as part of your GS, but in sociology, it is very important to understand this term Renaissance. In the document that I shared with you, that I'll be sharing with you, the term Renaissance refers to the revival of European art and literature under the influence of classical models. Again, the word classical also refers to that period, the ancient Greek Roman, the 3rd century, 4th century BC. It refers to that. So Renaissance is a revival of that art and literature. Okay. The next term that you need to familiarize yourself is the term enlightenment. Enlightenment is again a term which is commonly used. It refers to, is characterized by the belief that, it refers to the belief that people could comprehend and control the universe by means of reason and empirical research. Anyway, that's the definition that I shared in your text. I will break it down for you first. Then, when you see the definition, you'll be able to understand. Now, after the Dark Ages, the Renaissance came. In Renaissance, great artists came. Your Leonardo da Vinci, not DiCaprio, not your Titanic movie ka hero. We are referring to the great artist and scientist Leonardo da Vinci. Uh, Italian. You had Bernini, who was also an Italian painter and sculptor. You had great artists at that time during the Renaissance. and the church accepted some of this art, and art really flourished. Some of the best paintings in the world belong to that period. You must have heard of the Mona Lisa. That was one of that paintings. Now, after that, the ideas began to challenge some of these blind religious Christian beliefs of Europe. Okay. Now, some of this challenge came from within the church to the traditional religious ideas, to the conservative ideas, to the orthodox ideas of church. Some of the challenges came within the church, and that challenge is called Reformation. And a consequence of that is the Protestantism, or Protestants. And a lot of other challenges came from outside the church. The challenges are political, the challenges are economic, the challenges are in terms of challenging the church itself, the existence of church or the authority of church itself. Now, remember the word reason. I said reason is not giving scope for tradition, but by arriving at ideas, by arriving at to explore, to investigate truth by your own mind and experience. That is reason. Now, after the Renaissance, after some of the flourishing of arts and architecture and literature, after that started happening, what happens is when you start writing, new ideas begin to come. Until then, there was very strict ban on books by church. So first of all, it was difficult to print a book. You had to handwrite a book because printing press was not yet available. Printing press or the technology of printing really took off at a place called Gutenberg in Germany much later. Okay, it's about 14th, 15th century. But we are discussing before that. We are discussing 12th, 13th century. Books were written, but they were handwritten, and you had to make copies. You had to handwrite the copies again and again, which is why usually it's called a manuscript. Manuscript meaning manually written script. It is written by hand. Manuscript means written by hand. Now, when that Renaissance came and when advances were being made in art, architecture, basically what happens is your rigid rules of the church are beginning to be challenged, whether in art. So in art, when we say art, don't imagine oh, what is art? Art is a painting. No, don't think like that. Leonardo da Vinci made huge, even today, some of the textbooks of human anatomy in modern medicine go back to Da Vinci's paintings of the human anatomy. He would take dead bodies, he would dissect them very neatly. He wanted to understand how blood flowed within the human body. He wanted to understand how the eye looked. He wanted to understand what is the bone structure, what is the physiological anatomy, what is the skeletal system, where were the organs. Okay. He wanted to understand all of that so that he could draw well. Because if you remember, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of Renaissance art is also there's also a lot of nude art. It is human body as it is made, as God made. They believe as God made, naked. And in order to be able to sculpt it or to be able to paint that, he wanted to know how the naked body looked, and not just outside, but why did those colors come on the, when especially a Caucasian body. Caucasian is a racial term to refer to the white people whom we call Americans, or whom we call Gorelog, Firangi, Gora, the British people, the fair featured people. The technical term for them is Caucasian. It comes from the term Caucasus. Caucasus is a range in between that divides Europe with Russia. So that's a range, Caucasus range in geography. The term comes from there. They're called Caucasians. You can't call them whites, or at least white is a racially loaded term. Because if you call them white, you have to call the Africans blacks, and black is a racially loaded term. It is not politically an accurate term. I mean, if you're an IFS officer and you end up being in the UN or representing India in one of the forums, you can't call them whites, blacks. You can't call them by the color. If you have to call them, you have to use these technical terms. The technical term for the whites is Caucasian. The blacks have several terms. One of the term is negroid. Negroid is again a technical term. There is also politics to it, but anyway, for the purposes of our class at this level, it is important. It's enough for you to say. So the Caucasian body, when you throw light on it, it it turns red. Okay. So and artists, if you know, they try to experiment with how light falls on a body and how the body looks and which color, which shade, which and Leonardo da Vinci was a scientist. I mean, he's an artist, but to do art well, he had to open up the human body to understand what is where, and why does, when he had to show an emotion, emotion of embarrassment or emotion of blushing. Okay, when a person is blushing, especially on the Caucasian body, the cheeks turn red, and Da Vinci was curious, why is it turning red? So I mean, on dead bodies, I know it could disgust you a little, but that is how science is done. You can't be disgusted. So he opened up the body and he saw how blood capillaries were responsible for creating that blush on the human emotion, and that he could capture well in his paintings. Okay, so these are all important. These are all so these artists were simultaneously doing scientific discoveries by improving their art. Okay, while they were trying to progress in art, simultaneously ideas were being discussed. Now, the question is, at least there is an atmosphere where these ideas are now discussed openly. Till now, the church had a clamp, had a ban on new ideas. They could not be discussed. But now, because the church was brought into the fold, the church was convinced that there is value in revisiting the ideas. So, a lot of these paintings, the initial paintings, were done under the patronage of the church. The church was brought on board, saying what? Saying that God made this universe beautiful. This is biblical philosophy. This is Christian philosophy. So just go with me for now. So they believed that the artist and the church was convinced that God made the universe beautiful, and it is okay to depict it. Okay, it is okay to depict the night sky because God made the night sky and God made it beautiful, and whatever God made is good. So why not? God made the human body naked. So why should we be ashamed of it? Let us you know let us depict it in a way that God is glorified, so that people become aware how great God is by looking at these sculptures, by marveling at this human body, the anatomy. And mostly that is why these paintings were painting and sculptures were paintings and sculptures of biblical characters like David. David is a biblical character, is a story. So Michelangelo, another great sculptor, beautiful sculptor. Michelangelo's David was a 15 feet beautiful statue that was there in Rome. Unfortunately, that was brought down. It was broken. Today, in a beautiful museum in Italy, there is um, then what Michelangelo did was he created a copy of it, but this is a much smaller copy. It is about 9 feet copy of the original statue of David. Even today, the statue of David that is in Rome is one of the best. Okay, by the way, these examples that I'm giving you, please don't make notes of it. It is unnecessary. I am just trying to make you visualize and appreciate the idea. This Michelangelo, David, all this are not necessary. What is necessary? It will be there in the notes, it will be there on the PPT, and I will tell you the concept is necessary, not these details. Okay. Don't waste your time writing notes on these things, especially these small details. If it is so important, I will tell you to make a note of it. Now, so when they wanted to know, so Michelangelo is another great sculptor and innovator and discoverer. So what these people were doing was, so they convinced the church that please allow art and architecture and literature to go, and the church allowed. And so some of the best arts and sculptures that were commissioned by the church. The church paid for that art and sculpture, and they were actually made on the church. In fact, St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope of the Catholic, of the Christian people, he's the highest authority. Where he sits is in a city called Vatican City. It is in Rome. It is a country in itself, but it is situated in Rome, the city Rome. And there he sits in a church, but the church is called basilica. It's a huge structure. It's mammoth. It inspires. When a devotee goes there, it is imposing, and the church was happy to have this. In fact, that is a common strategy used by everybody in power. The Red Fort, when it was made, when the Rashtrapati Bhavan was being made, it is made. These designs are made in a way that they they provoke in you a sense of awe. You're just shocked, and they are imposing. They're huge. They're done because they represent power and authority. Okay, they are designed like that for particular reasons. Now, um, that architecture of the St. Peter's Basilica and the roof of St. Peter's is also painted. All of it is painted. Paintings for squares of miles and miles. There is painting and sculpture. All of this is done so that it inspires faith. It inspires. The church thought it will support their cause. It will make people believe more in God. But while that was happening, simultaneously another thing was happening, that these people, these artists and sculptors and innovators, they were exploring the human body, they were exploring the space, and new ideas were beginning to develop. And those ideas are crucial. Those ideas, for the first time, gave light. Their knowledge, okay, they started being recorded, which is why they are called enlightenment in a time of dark ages. So enlightenment is in some ways challenging the dark ages, the tradition, the orthodox, the blind beliefs. Enlightenment came as a source of knowledge through art, through science, a new knowledge that came in Europe. Now let me read the technical definition of enlightenment, and let me hope, I hope that you'll be able to appreciate the definition better. Um, the Enlightenment period marked a radical change from the traditional thinking of feudal Europe. It introduced new ways of thinking and looking at reality. Okay, so before that, if a person fell ill, they just prayed to God, went to the church, the father or the bishop prayed for them and hoped that the person lived. That's all. There was no medicine. When Da Vinci started dissecting the human body, and he started um, um observing what different organs are and all, and he started noticing that certain illnesses are caused to particular organs. He shared that knowledge, he recorded it, and this knowledge then got transferred to another, his apprentices, his students, and they started learning this. So the ideas of medicine began to germinate, they began to grow. Similarly with astronomy, when the first artists tried to draw the night sky, and they started observing, and they started using lenses, in particular ways to understand the night sky, they started noticing that, or what we call Copernican revolution, or Copernicus, through their systematic observation of how the sky moved, of how the celestial bodies moved, of how the sun moved, they began to notice, or they began to deduce, the word that I used earlier, if you remember. They saw patterns and they began to deduce that probably it is not the earth that is in the center of the universe. That is called a geocentric view of universe. Geo referring to earth, centric is in the center of the universe. So the Bible, or according to the Christian tradition, they believed until then that God made the world and the humans on it, all life on it, and the world is in the center of the universe. Suddenly, due to the telescope and due to the observations made with the help of telescope, scientists like Copernicus and Galileo discovered that it is not the earth that is in the center of the universe, it is actually the sun that is in the center of the universe. Sun, the Greek term for sun is helo or helios, which is why this theory is called heliocentric theory, because from a geocentric view of universe, from a geocentric theory that the earth is in the center of the universe, Copernicus said, no, it is the sun that is in the center of the universe. And because he said it, and the church didn't like it, because it did not go with the belief of the church. This is about 30th century. The church told Copernicus. Copernicus was a celebrated philosopher and scientist at that time. They asked Copernicus to take back the idea. Copernicus refused. He said, "This is the truth that I have arrived by my reason." Now again, look at the word reason. Like I said, it is his observation that he observed himself. Perception. Remember, he observed through the sight, and by looking at the pattern of if the stars move in this way, if the night sky is moving in this way, if the sun is moving in this way, it cannot be that the earth is in the center of the universe. It has to be that probably it is the sun around which the earth is moving, and not that the sun is moving around the earth. Okay, it is the earth that is moving around the sun. Copernicus came to this idea through his reason. He used the process of reason now, as opposed to tradition. And this became a challenge to the church, to existing authority. And by this reason, Copernicus was asked to remove it, to take back this statement. Copernicus refused. Uh, he was killed. Okay, so not just Copernicus, many scientists during that time had death given to them by the church because they gave ideas that were contrary to the existing beliefs of the church at that time. So, which is why the knowledge that came about as, or actually not just knowledge came later. I want you to appreciate this is a new way of looking at the world based on reason, not on tradition. Just because you say it, just because you say it is sacred, I am not going to accept it as truth. I am going to think for myself. I am going to observe. I'm going to rely on my senses. The last class I gave you extensively on the word empirical. I'm going to rely on my senses to arrive at the conclusion of what is true. Okay, um, based on reason. So I have senses, I have my mind, I can deduce, and I will arrive at a conclusion. So this is a new way of thinking. This is, I want you to transport yourself, visualize yourself in the medieval Europe, and try to imagine at a time when everybody is blindly following what the church says. Even today we have in the villages a lot of people who blindly follow. Even 150 years back, we were burning women, widows, on pyre, on the funeral pyre of their husbands, because we believed it was a blind belief. That then led to her uh, uh, a good life for her after that. That was a blind belief. People unquestioningly followed it for years, for hundreds of years. Somebody came and challenged it. Raja Ram Mohan Roy came and challenged it. But why did Raja Ram Mohan Roy came and challenged it? Based on reason, of course, but why? Because he was influenced by European ideas. And European ideas were in turn influenced by these discoveries. And these discoveries are scientific discoveries, but they are based on reason. And that is how it is different from tradition or dark ages or blind beliefs. Okay, these are reason. Um, Enlightenment also holds the view that the physical world is dominated by natural laws. Once the church allowed for certain ideas to be discussed and recorded and transferred, what happened was people began to observe more keenly. Like I just gave you an example in biology and in physics, in astronomy, how observations became more crucial, recording the observation and systematically thinking about it. That they continued in every sphere of life. And through these recordings, through systematic observation and recording, they noticed that there are laws to the natural world. Things that happen in the natural world don't just happen randomly, or till then the belief was God willed it to happen. If there is a cyclone, you have sinned and God caused the cyclone. This is something that we have even today in India. Unfortunately, there are people who use terms like, "Oh, look at where the society is going. Oh, look at how the Kali Yuga has come, and all these deaths are a consequence of Kali Yuga." Science is not going to accept that kind of thinking. Reason should not accept that kind of a thinking. Somewhere, sometime, 1,000 years back, somebody said in 2020, calamity is going to come, disaster is going to come. No, we are going to base our thinking, our pursuit of truth, our investigation of truth based on reason and empirical evidence. Reason and empirical evidence. Reason is the process, empirical evidence is what is given to us. Now, based on um, so Enlightenment believed. So when the scientists, or when these artists, they started observing more keenly, when these philosophers started observing the natural world more keenly, they started noticing that there are laws to this natural world. That if you put a apple seed, only an apple tree is going to grow. Okay, that's a natural world. That's a natural law. You won't have a pear or a strawberry there. The direction of growth is towards the sun. That's another natural law. Objects fall to the earth. Newton, apple falls to the earth. That is a natural law. So what is happening is, you are noticing that there are laws to this natural world, and God is not willing them to happen. They are happening naturally. This realization is enlightenment. It is a crucial part. It is the core. It is the heart of enlightenment, that the physical world has natural laws to it. And the first scientist that really broke open all hell loose is Newton, Isaac Newton. He was at University of Cambridge, at a college called Trinity College. Um, Even today, the apple tree, where it is believed, I mean, that is a rumor, but there is apple trees in the orchards of Trinity College, and even now, if you go there, you can see these places. And although it fell on his head or not, that is irrelevant. But yes, the apples do fall in the season down. And he asked the question. He asked. So, what I want you to appreciate is that the atmosphere changed for you to ask the question, "Why is the apple falling?" He did that in 16th century. That person could not have asked that question 100 years back. Sorry, no, 500 years back. In the peak of dark ages, you could not have even asked such a question. And that is what I want you to realize, that there is a change in the atmosphere that is happening. First, due to Renaissance in the 11th and 12th century. And due to Renaissance, the church allowed a certain level of inquiry to happen for people to observe and investigate. And as a consequence of that investigation, certain data was recorded. And in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, Copernicus, Galileo, and by the time Newton comes to Cambridge, he has all this data available to him. Already concepts are there in his head running. On those concepts, he now notices a new fact, that the apple fell. He is able to perceive it. That perception through his visual sense, he integrates with existing concepts that he is seen by Galileo. He integrates both of them, and he realizes that there is gravity to earth. That is reason. He does that through a process of reasoning. He gives his new law of gravity, law of gravitation, Newton's laws of motions itself. He says the universe, the celestial bodies. Actually, Newton developed this mostly for the celestial bodies, mostly for astronomical purposes. So he gave the theory that the sun, the moon, the earth, they are moving based on particular laws. And he gave the Newton's laws of motions. So, enlightenment is this new way of thinking, being able to think that um, you can arrive at the truth, at the knowledge through reason and empirical evidence. That is enlightenment. Um, that the physical world is dominated by natural laws, and those laws can be investigated. Let me just yeah. So the view that because the physical world was dominated by natural laws, um, and some of these laws began, whether it's the Darwin's theory, Darwin again, another student from University of Cambridge, uh, he gave theory of evolution. You must be knowing that. We will discuss evolution a little bit because that is very, very important for what sociologists did, or even before sociology was born. The early social theorists took the theory of evolution and used it for society and the social world. Theory of evolution is for the biological world, how life on earth began. That theory of evolution tries to explain that. What social theorists, what early philosophers did was they took that and applied that. At that time they were doing this. In fact, we will read about Auguste Comte, who says social physics, if there is a physics for the physical world, for the natural world, there can be a physics for the social world too. So there was an immense faith in these laws. Suddenly philosophers began to notice that you could explain a lot of things in the world and not just say God caused it. God caused the rain, God caused the sun, God is causing earth to move, God is causing this, God is causing disease. Medicine began. You are begin to heal things not by prayer and by the power of the Father, but through intervention, through surgery, through medicine. You begin to notice that things move not because God is causing it, but because there are laws of motion. You begin to realize that the rain happens because of the water cycle. So people began to realize that there are laws to this physical universe, and we can discover them. And once we discover them, and once we understand them, we can manipulate them to our own advantage. There is immense faith within a few hundred years. There is immense faith in this new scientific ideas. Okay, it is a consequence of enlightenment. Now, that faith in scientific ideas for the physical world also translated into the social world. And there was faith that if we are able to deal with disease, we should be able to deal with poverty too. Poverty is a social problem, like disease is a biological problem. If we are able to discover laws to understand the human body, the human anatomy, medicine, and we are able to intervene surgically and recover a person from disease, poverty is like a social disease. We should be able to do that to poverty too. This was a faith. Anyway, whether the faith is right or not, we will discuss over the course of this few lectures, but at least there was a faith there. So enlightenment led to a faith, to a belief that the physical world was dominated by natural laws, and um, the social world is also dominated by natural laws. Thus, it was for the philosopher or the scientist using reason and research evidence to discover these social laws, to discover these physical laws. Once they understood how the social world or the physical world worked, the Enlightenment thinkers had a practical goal. And the practical goal is, once we understand all of this, we will make this world a better place. That is the goal of the Enlightenment thinker, that we will make this world a better place. Now, this is the definition. I just read out the definition as it is there in the textbook for you. You once now, when you read the definition, you'll be able to understand it very easily. I mean, we've discussed in detail. Um, okay, we will take our customary 10-minute break. I want you to be back by 10 minutes. We have done with the concepts. Now we will go into the actual ideas and theories of what happened in modern social during historically what happened in Europe, what were the changes that came about in Europe, what are the social changes that came about in Europe because of these things, and these are the key concepts that inform, that are at the heart of those social changes. These are the key concepts. We will discuss what are those social changes, and how did Europe respond to it as a society, and in that European response to the changes, sociology was born to observe those, how the society was responding to the changes. Sociology was born to observe that. So we'll discuss that in the next half. Um, we are going slowly. I am going into the details of each term deliberately because this is an online course. I don't have a blackboard to write. It will be much easier if I could write on a board, and if it was a real class. But until the lockdown is lifted, we need to make do with this. So it's 9:30. I will start the lecture at 9:40 sharp. We'll take a break. So what I'll do is I'll quickly, in a minute, summarize whatever we just said in one-liners. But remember, these one-liners are only so that you can easily understand the concept. Okay, these one-liners are not for you to, in exam, first of all, in exam, questions will never come. What is reason? What is enlightenment? What is Renaissance? What is revolution? It doesn't come that way. The questions are part of, um the question is pretty straightforward. Sociology, what were the changes in modern Europe that led to the birth of sociology? What is the, actually, I will read out the questions for you, I think. And also, I will add the questions. I think I'll do that. What I'll do is on your basic term notes, I'll also add the questions for you so that you have an idea of, for that particular topic, what the questions were. So, questions were, sociology is preeminently study of modern societies. Okay. And actually, for this, it is because sociology was born as a response to modern societies, and that is why. Another question is, how had enlightenment contributed to the emergence of sociology? Yeah. How had enlightenment contributed to the emergence of sociology? We just discussed what enlightenment is. Enlightenment, in one word, is the age of reason. Age, age, age of reason, or age of enlightenment. It is the flourishing of reason. Okay. So we discussed enlightenment. There are scientific discoveries. There are the scientific discoveries in medicine, scientific discoveries in something else, and all of that led to the enlightenment. Enlightenment is a challenge to tradition. It is a challenge to old ways of thinking and doing, and therefore there were social changes, there were intellectual changes. Actually, we will discuss the specific ideas in enlightenment, but you have an idea. The question is going to be, how had enlightenment contributed to the emergence of sociology? And if you, the problem is, a lot of students don't have clarity on what is enlightenment, what is reason, what is enlightenment, what is Renaissance. So they end up writing Renaissance, revival of art. Renaissance, in one word, is revival of art and revival of classical. Classical, when I refer, the word classical refers to 3rd century BC. Revival of classical art and literature and philosophy is Renaissance. People don't distinguish between Renaissance and Enlightenment. Enlightenment follows Renaissance, and Enlightenment is the age of reason. Renaissance was still within the church. Enlightenment is beginning to challenge the church also, and Enlightenment is also challenging the state, by the way. It not only challenges church, the state at that time, the monarchy at that time, the political structure, got its legitimacy from the church. The church said to the people, to the common people, that monarch, God instituted monarch. This is called the divine theory of kingship, or divine theory of state, which is that God made the king king. So you need to follow the king. So king got his political legitimacy from the church. So church was sacred, just like the state was sacred. The king was sacred, and nobody could challenge either the king or the church. Oh, church also. I think I should have clarified this earlier. The word church doesn't refer to a building. When I'm constantly using the word church, I am referring to all. So think of it like Hindus. If I say Hindus, what is it? It is all the people of Indian society who believe in the Hindu faith. Church is all the people. It is not just a building. It is all of that edifice, all the pope, the bishops, the archbishops, the people, all of that together is called the church. Church is not a simple building or an individual. It is that entire structure, okay, of faith. That is church. Now, the reason, this new way of thinking that came as a consequence of Renaissance, definitely challenged, why should we believe what the church says? Eventually, it came to the point where, there are laws to the universe. God is not doing it. We can discover the laws and we can make our lives better. That is reason. Similarly to the state also, people started asking, and this was done by particular philosophers called Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. They developed what is called a social contract theory as opposed to a divine rights theory. Instead of believing that God made the state and the king, the monarch, they started questioning that theory, and they started giving other theories. that we, just like there are natural laws, there are social laws, and they started giving those theories. Anyway, the question is how had so in Enlightenment you should only discuss this part. You shouldn't discuss Renaissance, or you shouldn't what people do is they will discuss Industrial Revolution, they will discuss French Revolution, they will discuss everything. You shouldn't, which is why I'm going into such detail of what is which, because when a question is how had Enlightenment contributed to the emergence of sociology, you should stick, and it's a 10 marker. It's a 2015 question. It's a 10 marker. Problem is, you will write everything that is connected to it if you don't have clarity on what is what. You should write only about Enlightenment. Okay, it's a straight 10 marker. If you stick to Enlightenment, you don't write Industrial Revolution, you don't write Commercial Revolution, you don't write French Revolution. Stick to Enlightenment. There is enough in Enlightenment to write that question. Then there is another question, which is, how did the French Revolution and Industrial Revolution play an important role in the emergence of sociology? Now, straight away again. Now here, don't write Enlightenment, Renaissance, reason, all that. Straight away get to French Revolution, Industrial Revolution. What is French Revolution? If we have time, probably we'll go up till there, but otherwise also no problem. We are going slowly because I need the foundations for you to be laid solidly. So what is French Revolution? What is Industrial Revolution? And how each of them caused changes in the society, and how sociology, the earliest thinkers of sociology, started to address or try to understand the changes that came, A, due to French Revolution, B, due to Industrial Revolution, and what they observed and they theorized, what changes are happening. That is your early sociology, and that is the emergence of sociology. Or another question is, write short note on the emergence of sociology as an outcome of modernity and social change in Europe, keeping sociological perspective in mind. Now, for this, you can write everything. This is a 150 words question. Yeah, for this, you can write everything, from Renaissance to, but again, you should know how much to give in what, 150 words. So you'll write a little bit about Renaissance, you will write something about reason, the age of enlightenment, or the age of reason or enlightenment. Then you will write more about Industrial Revolution, you will write more about French Revolution, you will write about capitalism, and then these are the changes and how sociology was born to understand these changes. So you also need to know which to write less and which to write more. You can't write 150 words, 150 words, you can't write enlightenment. These are all part of that topic, and you should allot, and how much to allot where is also something we will see. How is emergence of sociology linked with modernization of Europe? Remember, I told you the word "zation" is added. So now you can't write modernity or modernism. Modernism is beliefs and attitudes, which means you are not going to write about ideas or intellectual factors that led. You will not write too much about that. Okay. Because the question is, how is emergence of sociology linked with modernization of Europe? You're going to focus more on the political, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and some ideas and changes. That's it. You're not going to talk about Enlightenment, or definitely not about Renaissance. Okay. Then there is, write short note on sociology as a byproduct of Industrial Revolution, straight away. Then another short note on intellectual sources for the rise of sociology. Now, that is the next slide which we will look at, the intellectual sources for the rise of sociology. Let's go there. Yeah. So I think by now you got an idea. Revolution is a total and sudden change. Reason is a synthesis of concepts and perception. Renaissance is a revival of classical art, literature, and ideas. Enlightenment is the flourishing or the age of reason. Okay, single word definitions, just for you to understand. Yeah. Now, what is modernity? Okay, again, a term which is regularly used. We use it all the time, and I need you to have a good handle on what this term means. The term most generally refers to the social conditions, the processes, and discourses. Discourse refers to a general understanding of a particular idea. So today, there is a discourse on gender and gender inequality. Okay, there is a discourse on, okay, let's just say there is a discourse on consent. The movie Pink and consent and all of that. There is a discourse on that. That discourse was not part of the Indian society even 30 years ago. Discourse is, what is the general talk? Okay, what is the general talk in the society? That is discourse. Okay, it has to do with ideas, prevalent, predominant ideas of that time. Discourses change over time. And what is the predominant, prevalent, socially accepted idea at that time? That is discourse. So modernity generally refers to the social conditions, processes, and discourses consequent, as a consequence, after the age of enlightenment. Social conditions will be industrial revolution, the French Revolution, political changes, social changes, economic changes. Processes have to do with whatever the changes are happening, and discourses are the idea of evolution, theory of evolution, the idea of laws of motion, the idea of that all humans are equal, the idea that there are laws to the natural world and we can discover them, and once we can understand them, we will be able to manipulate them to improve our condition. These are all discourses, these are all ideas, and they're all consequence of enlightenment. And when these things are there, it is called modernity. Another sociological definition of modernity, there is a very, very celebrated sociologist called Anthony Giddens. His definition of modernity, we will go through it. Modernity is associated with a certain set of attitudes towards the world, the idea of the world as open to transformation by human intervention. Now, this is close to what the first student, Deepika, gave, remember? So first thing, it is a set of attitudes towards the world. The idea of the world as open to transformation. Remember, in the Enlightenment, in reason, there is also a faith that we can change the world. In Dark Ages, in religion, conservative means the world should not be changed or cannot be changed. We accept the world as it is. If there is a cyclone, we will say, well, God willed it. What can we do? We have sinned too much. There is too much evil in the world, which is why there is a cyclone. But instead, when you believe that a human can transform the world, that faith, from faith in God to faith in human reason. It is also called humanism, a term that is there in your GS syllabus also, paper 1, and also there in sociology. It's called humanism. It is a faith in the human reason to transform and improve life. It is a faith in human reason to transform and improve life. So that is part of the modern thought, that is part of modernism and modernity, that faith, that change in attitude. The second, modernity is also a complex set of economic institutions, especially industrial production and market economy. Okay, I think it is pretty straightforward. Now, economic institutions, even banking is an economic institution. A listed company is an institution. Okay, again, the word institution, you may be thinking institutions are just schools or buildings. No, institution in sociology is particular social relations over a prolonged period of time with their rules. Social relations, particular social relations over very long periods of time with their own rules of engagement. That is an institution. So, marriage is an institution. In sociology, marriage is an institution. What is marriage? Marriage is a relation between a male and a female, a man and a woman. In contemporary times, that is changing. You can also have marriage between a man or a woman and a woman. But let us just stick for some time, let's not be so radical yet. We will stick to the conventional definition, which is marriage is an institution where a man and a woman come into a relationship for prolonged, and marriage as an institution has been there for a long while, hundreds of years, thousands of years back also there has been marriage. It's a social institution, and there are rules. You should not cheat, You come together to procreate, to create another life. So all of these are the rules of engagement, and some rules are also to do with who does what, who is the head, who has to listen. Today those rules are changing, but basically an institution has these rules. Okay, the word institution does not refer to a school building or a college building or something like that. In fact, it is not brick and mortar. It is not tangible. It is not like a wall. It is actually social relations, specific social relations. So church is an institution. The church that I was talking about is an institution, not the building church, not some walls and all that. No, I'm talking about there is a pope, there are archbishops, there are bishops, there are fathers, there are sisters, nuns, who then interact with the common public. In the West, they interact with the common. How should they interact? On a Sunday morning, they will come. They're called these people are called the clergy, the one on the top, and the common folk. How do they come together? How do they engage? How much money should the common folk pay to the church? In church, they have to pay 1/10 of whatever they earn or produce. It's called the tithe. They have to pay that. All of this is the institution of church. Okay, army is an institution. Hospital is an institution. Okay, because hospital has very specific, there are doctors, there are nurses, there are managers, but then there are also patients, and patients look and should act in certain way. The doctors act and perform in a certain way. And what is the relationship between a doctor and a patient? There is a power dynamic there. The doctor is always in power. When a doctor asks you a question, you have to tell the truth. You have to answer. You can't just keep mum and silent. No, there are rules of engagement between a doctor and a patient. It is part of the institution of a hospital, not the four walls. Again, it happens in a four walls. It happens in a space, yes, but more importantly, appreciate the relationship. Sociologically speaking, we are talking about the relationship between the doctor and a patient in a hospital. There is a power dynamic there. Similarly, in a university, between a professor and a student, in a classroom, there is a professor and a student. There is a relationship there. And there are very clear rules. When I am talking, you don't talk back, or you don't talk amongst each other. You don't talk unless you are asked to talk. These are rules of the game in the institution of university, actually institution of education. Yeah. So anyway, now look at the second part of that definition, of the second definition given by Giddens. It is a complex set of economic institutions. Banking is an institution. Banking is a financial institution where common people come together to either lend money or save their money, to deposit their money. And there is an institution that regulates the availability or the flow of finance and money in the society. It is a very specific institution. It is a modern institution. It was born in Italy. It later went and spread across the world. But banking is an institution. Public listed company is an institution. Our East India Company, one of the first companies, so people could go and buy stocks in it. It's called a joint stock company. Until then, a person owned his or her business. Okay, a person entirely owned the business. But now you could create a business firm which is owned by several people, but they don't manage it. They then hire a CEO, and who then the CEO hires his team and further employees who manage the business, but they don't own it. The owners can be a common man with a little money. You can go and invest in shares. Say you go tomorrow and invest shares of Google. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. Actually, you can open an account. You can go and buy Google shares. When you buy Google share, you own a small fraction of the Google company. You're literally a small owner of the Google company. How is that possible? How can you own Google? That is the brilliance. That is the genius of the idea or the institution of a joint stock company. It came about first in Amsterdam in the year 1600, the first Dutch East India Company, because in those days, shipping began by 1600. The Portugal, Holland is Netherlands. Netherlands is a country. That time it was called Holland. They were great sea traders, seafarers. They were a colonizing power. Portugal, Spain, and Italy, these were four major colonial powers. Before France, Germany, and England became colonial powers, these were the four major colonial powers. So, but shipping was a very risky business. If you bought a ship as a rich man in the society, you bought a ship and you sent it for voyage to get spices from India or to get cotton from Americas, or metal. In fact, Spain and Portugal used to send their ships to get gold from South America. The problem is these are vast distances, and these used to be sail ships. They are not motor ships. They are sailing with the help of wind. They are at the mercy of nature. They could be hit by a storm, by a cyclone. The ship is gone. You either bear huge profits or huge losses. Profits huge, but losses, you're done. I mean, if the ship sank, everything is gone. The cargo is gone, but also the ship is gone. Ship is a very, very expensive piece. So what they came up with this idea that instead of one person bearing all the losses and one person taking all the profits, what we can do is, can we create an institution, a joint stock company, that will then allow different people to own a piece of the company? They can come and invest in shares. They can share a piece of the company. They can buy a share of the company. In doing so, when it is losses, the losses are distributed. When it is profit, the profits are distributed. So all the wealthy people in the society came together and they created a joint stock company, and they then bought many vessels. The problem is, when one vessel fails, that owner doesn't die. Instead, the loss is distributed, but at least 4 vessels brought back the cargo. So the profit is also distributed. So everybody is doing well. It is not hitting one family or one person and he's collapsing. So that is the brilliance of a joint stock company. It was invented. The first stock exchange, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, is the first stock exchange in the world. It was instituted in the year 1600. The Dutch East India Company was the first company that was made. And again, these are details. Don't have to write them down. Not even as an example, not necessary. This is all for you to appreciate and understand what is happening behind. So these are economic institutions: banking, joint stock company. Factory is an economic institution. Until then, households produced, if it's a barber, or if it's a shoemaker, if he's a baker, he baked bread in his backyard. A shoemaker, few shoemakers came in their street and they made shoes in a small, karkhana kind of a thing. But for the first time, factories came, or weavers weaved in their house. Even today, you go to some districts, whether it is in Anantapur or whether it is in Kakinada, an entire village, people will weave in their houses. There are these are beautiful instruments. I'll see if I can find a photo. But this machine kind of a thing, this spinning thing is there in the house. It is set up, and individuals make that weaving. Anyway, so, but once factory came, all the men, and obviously when they are doing it together, the children are helping, the wife is also helping. For some time the man will take rest, the wife will help. For some time she will go cook, and then the children are coming, they are helping. It is a very different family structure, and it's a very different social structure. The society will be very different because each one is working within his own family. So every business is owned by the family, and they are working in their house or near their house. But once the factory comes, factory requires huge capital. So only big landlords could take the money by selling that land and started developing huge, buy big plots of land and setting up factories. And for factory to set up, there has to be technology. There is metal, there is machine, there are motors. All of that is put together. It is bought. To buy them, you need money. So that is why only big landlords can become capitalists. They come, they set up these factories in the cities. That is how cities begin to grow. When they set up a factory and all the men are supposed to come 8 o'clock in the morning, there is a siren, and by 8 o'clock all the men have to assemble on the factory floor, and after a pledge or something, the factory begins operation and they have to work. Suddenly the women and men are separated from the home. What will the children do now? Okay, so school came and all the children were sent to school, because to work in a factory you need technical skill, and to need technical skill you need labor force that understands these technical things, which is why schools were invented. And they were a copy of the factory. So factory 8 o'clock, the workers assemble to work. School 8 o'clock, the students assemble to study. So that they are, so because the first time factory is set up, obviously till then people used to wake up whenever they want, work whenever they want. They had a discipline, yes, but they were free. Suddenly by 8 o'clock you have to come. Suddenly clock was invented, the watch was invented, and by that time they had to come. Siren was invented, which are very interesting things. I mean, please understand, this is regulating the human behavior, the social human behavior in particular ways. This was not there until then, not it didn't exist. So to do that, you need to condition them. So initially the factories had a lot of trouble regulating human behavior. After a few hours they didn't feel like working, they would want to go back and sleep, because that's what they did in their houses, house businesses. But in a factory you can't do that. They were made to slog to work for 16 hours, 18 hours. So to condition them to work like that, school routines were made for 8 hours, so that they were used to staying in a school and working and listening to authority for 8 hours, so that when they become workers in a factory, it comes naturally. 8 o'clock, you just go, you become a worker, you work. There is an authority. In school there is a class teacher. In the factory there is a supervisor. The supervisor supervises on you, and you deliver to the authority. You have been conditioned for 10-15 years in a school like that, so that now when you come, it is a smooth flow. All of this is manipulating and changing human social behavior from what it was earlier. These are a complex set of economic institutions, especially industrial production and market economy. Then a certain range of political institutions came about. Until then, the monarch, the state existed like a monarch. There was the king had all powers. Instead, for the first time, concepts like democracy came, voting came, common people aspired to be part of the political legislature. It was understood that the state was not made by God and put on the society, but we can make our own state. We can choose our own elected representatives. Elections came. There was separation of powers by Voltaire. Voltaire said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he said, therefore, one person should not have all the powers. Before that, the monarch was the legislator. He could make rules. He was the executive. He would implement the rules. He was also the judiciary. He determined when somebody made wrong or right. Voltaire suggested that this should be split. Legislature, executive, judiciary, the three branches of the state, it should be split into that. And accordingly, states started experimenting with these models. And eventually we have the model today, which is the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary as separate powers. This is called the separation of powers. These are political institutions. The legislature is a political institution. The parliament is a beautiful political institution where people come and elect certain people to represent them. And those people then go and they form the government. They are at the center of the power, not the king. Okay. Or the executive, the bureaucracy is again an institution. Bureaucracy is an institution. Bureaucracy is civil servants or officers and citizens. There are rules of engagement. How does a bureaucrat engage, and how does a bureaucrat engage between themselves? How does a bureaucrat engage with the political representative, the minister, and how does a bureaucrat engage with? These are all rules are already given. So bureaucracy is a social institution. It's a political institution. Nation state, interesting, for the first time, based on language and ethnicity, kingdoms got divided. Okay, you will be reading more detailedly as part of your GS1 world history. But basically, the birth of the nation state happened, where so instead of big kingdoms, every linguistic or ethnic group started asking for autonomy, for political autonomy, and they started becoming divided from the kingdom. And they started instituting, because it is a popular demand. You want to be like Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, like how India became separate, or let's say how Bangladesh became separate from Pakistan. Okay, earlier Bangladesh was part of the Pakistan, East Pakistan and West Pakistan, but Bangladesh fought for their autonomy from the Pakistan and became independent. Usually these political revolutions come from beneath, from the popular this thing, and once they come, they materialize and they become independent, And that is how the early nation states, whether it's Germany or France or Italy or Portugal, these came as a product of those nation states. Mass democracy is another political institution. I just discussed that. So, coming back to the definition, largely as a result of these characteristics, modernity is vastly more dynamic than any previous type of social order. It is a society, more technically, a complex of institutions which, unlike preceding cultures, lives in the future rather than the past. Now, there is a word that the second student, Shailaja, used when I asked what is modernity. She said this: it is the present as opposed to the past. You see how that is also part of the definition. Modernity is understood as, in one word, it is a break from the past. It is a break from the past way of thinking. It is a break from the past way of living. It is a break from the past way of working. It is a break from the past way of interacting. It is a break. It is a separation from the past. And until then, societies and individuals in a society always looked to the past to decide what is right and to determine what is good. Societies were conservative. They didn't change. They changed very, very gradually. They didn't change. They were as they were. It is only with modernity, remember enlightenment and modernity, what happens is, um, with enlightenment in modernity, what you have is, you have you look down upon orthodox and traditional ideas. Okay, you think we don't want to follow them anymore, and using your own reason and your evidence, the empirical evidence, you arrive at your own truth. Okay, that is enlightenment. And because, remember, I told you, enlightenment also has a faith to improve, to transform the world, which means you are looking at the future. You are no more looking at the past. God said so, Bible said so, Vedas said so, Dharma said so, Quran said so. No, my forefathers said so, my grandfather said so. No. Science, reason, enlightenment is a promise for a better future based on human reason and on human effort. So it suddenly society and individuals change the direction from the past to the future. Now they look at the future. We want a better future. Through medicine, we can improve health. We can improve the social, the power dynamics, where the king has everything or the church has everything. From there, we come to a point where the power is more equitably distributed. In citizenship, every individual has equal vote. Okay, economy is transformed. We aspire for a better society, more goods and services. Every country is competing to get better. Okay, science and technology is improving. So everything is about from the past to the future. Earlier, what is truth? Truth, whatever the Bible says, whatever my grandfather says. What is truth? Science will tell. And truth is continuously changing. Every time science tries to get even better, even better. Okay, so modernity, I bolded the words deliberately. Modernity lives in the future rather than the past. It is a break from the past and it looks towards the future. There is a promise for a better future in modernity. Now, this is the rough definition of modernity.